Our staff here at the diocesan office meets every week on a Tuesday morning. And when we meet, the first thing we do is we go around the table and we do some kind of forum that invites us all to share kind of where we are, how we're feeling at this particular moment. And sometimes when we gather, there is this general sense of people being kind of energized and excited. Sometimes there's a kind of a mix of things, and sometimes a general sense of people being a little kind of subdued or sad or whatever. And I've often thought, and I've been thinking particularly this Lent, what it would be like for someone to walk in and just have a snapshot of a given day of our staff meeting. If you gave one day, you might think, well, these are a cheerful crowd. They must be fun to work with. And then you may come another week and it's like, ooh, they're kind of a sad sack lot. I'm not sure I would like to sort of spend a lot of time with them. And it's an interesting reflection on pictures in a moment. And the reason I think about this is I've been thinking about some of the themes and the attitudes that we find in Lent. I'm thinking about also if somebody came to our church just once, we're kind of complete, sort of had no idea about church tradition, and they walked in on a Sunday in Lent, they might have a particular impression about Christians. And so, I mean, for example, this past week in kind of Luke chapter 13, there was this kind of articulation about the narrow door and the door being shut and I don't know you. And it's like, well, that's kind of grim. And so that's one example. This coming Sunday, we read from St. Paul's letter to the first letter to the Corinthians in chapter 10 about this warning against idolatry. It's a very kind of a stern sort of warning sort of text. And so if you just could have dropped in at a given point, you would think, these people are kind of serious. I think I want to say two things about that. The first is this: it is literally dropping in at a given point. Lent is a season in our church year that has a particular flavor. And as we walk through it, the lessons have that particular flavor. They are penitential. They are lessons that invite us to penitence and self-examination. But it is a picture. That's why there are fasts in our tradition and feasts. The feast reminds us regularly that you can't always be fasting. You can't also always be feasting, and there's also something called ordinary time. And so I guess what I want to say about that is it is true that in this season, somebody who are visiting our church might think, they're kind of somber. Well, we are. And I don't think we should actually apologize for that or do anything necessarily different. But the second thing that I think really I want to say as we think about this is, our temptation may be to, we want to kind of sort of blunt this, or we want to kind of make this upbeat in some way, or, how can we make this a little bit more cheerful so it's kind of less morose or sad? But the truth is, all of us from time to time in our lives need that stern word. We need that stern, the scripture is filled with different places of warnings to the people of God. If you don't do this, there are going to be consequences to that. How we live our lives matters and has consequences. And so there are warnings throughout the scripture. And indeed, Paul talks to the Ephesian elders, I think in Acts chapter 20, he talks about giving to them the whole counsel of God, not just the happy, cheerful things, but the warnings and the challenges. So as we live in the season and might feel a little self-conscious that perhaps the lessons are a little bit grim or the tone of the hymns are a little bit minor. Some of us just love that kind of thing, but not everybody does. But just want to encourage us not to make any excuses for that. It is a picture of us in a season at a time. And that's part of what it means to be human. That's part of what it means to be church. Part of what it means to be our staff. Sometimes we're upbeat and sometimes we're a little somber. And that's just kind of how it is. But secondly, that invitation to penitence, those warnings that are in the scriptures that we read through the season, we actually need to hear. And even people coming to visit us perhaps for the first time, they might also need to hear that. We trust in this, that there is a grace and a movement of God in all that we do, including kind of the theme and the attitude and the tone of Lent as we are in this season. So I just invite you to notice those things as you go through Lent yourself, but also not be afraid of those things as we do our Sunday service and our Sunday worship, because that is part of the whole rhythm of what it means to be Christian and what it means to be human.